What's shakin' bacons? Today I wanted to talk to you about The Shape of Water, particularly because since it's become a little more well-known recently, especially with the Golden Globes just happening, with Guillermo del Toro winning Best Director and then winning Best Score, and there was a bunch of other nominations. I think they had 7 total nominations. I think people are going to be paying a little bit more attention to this movie, so I thought I should review it. So, if you have not seen it yet, I am not going to talk about spoilers until near the end of the review. So if you're debating whether you want to see it or if it'd be something that would be interesting to you, that way it won't be spoiled for you by listening to this review. And I'll go ahead and give you a heads up just before I start talking about things related to spoilers so that you know to pause it or click away or make a decision regarding whether or not you'd like to hear some of what the end plot is and what happens. So, The Shape of Water, I'm going to assume that most of you know what it is, so I won't describe it too much. If you haven't seen the trailer, go watch the trailer, but in brief, The Shape of Water is about a woman who does not have a voice, so she is mute, and she works at a facility where they bring in an experiment of some sort, and she ends up making contact with the experiment when she realizes it's a live creature and it's intelligent. And so they strike up a relationship, and she decides to rescue it from the facility and from the experiments that it's going through. So I think that that's all covered in the trailer. That should have no spoilers for you. So my personal rating for this movie when I saw it was an 8.5 out of 10. And I would say that this is one of those movies where the audience feelings and the critics' feelings were pretty much on par. IMDb showed, as of when I checked it, an 8.3 out of 10 rating. Rotten Tomatoes had a 93% fresh rating, but the average critic score was 8.4 out of 10, and the audience score was also 8 and change out of 10 as well. So this is one of those kind of rare birds that have a pretty even critic and audience thought towards it. And I think it's pretty well deserved. I didn't rate it a full 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 because I have a couple quibbles with some of the decisions that were made, but I'll talk about that in the spoilers part of this review near the end. So in terms of acting, story, and visuals and everything else, the acting was phenomenal for this movie. Every actor was well cast. Every actor did a phenomenal job at portraying their characters, the depth of their characters, the emotions that they had throughout the film. They did such an amazing job. I'm not surprised that there were so many nominations. Michael Shannon played an excellent antagonist. He was Colonel Strickland. I think he was a colonel. If he's not a colonel, I apologize. He played Strickland at any rate. He did an excellent job. He has kind of that square, blocky look that is very typical of men of that time period. So he fit in well, just well cast, great actor in general. Sally Hawkins, of course, as the lead, did fantastic in terms of signing and her portrayal of the character, the emotions that came around. There was a section where she had quite a long monologue speaking to a friend of hers, and the emotions that came out as she was speaking to him with sign language was so evident. She did such a great job. I keep saying she did a great job because she really did. She deserved that nomination for sure. She probably deserved to win the award, but, you know, congratulations to the actual winner. Octavia Spencer, also amazing job as a supporting actress. She portrayed her character and the reactions of that character to the treatment that she received in that time period with such aplomb that it was outstanding. And I told my husband as we left the theater, I said, Octavia Spencer should be nominated at the very least for Best Supporting Actress because she did such a good job. And she really did. She had so many funny moments and such a great role in the story without trivializing her as just like a sidekick. It was just very well handled. Every character was well portrayed, well written, well handled, and well shown. And Del Toro does a great job, I think, in this film of not giving you a true villain. You have a character who is intended to be the villain. In this case, we all know that it is Strickland, who is Michael Shannon's character. They show him, he's set up to be the antagonist, and it's alluded to in the trailer. But Del Toro explores the motivations and the inner workings of the mentality of these people in such a way that you can't truly point a finger at this character and say, yeah, he's just an evil person. And I really love when movies and stories have that ambiguity in them, and they handled it very well. So the story, speaking of which, was very well written. It was intriguing. It had arcs that I thought were going to go in one direction that did not, and things that you would expect to happen, or things that would have been a trope or something that is kind of done repeatedly in Hollywood or in big movies, were not done, and it played against my expectations. And I love it when a film plays against my expectations. And it's hard to come out with truly original content or things that are surprising these days, just because at this point there are so many films in the library of human history that it's hard to really come out and surprise the viewer. And this took some turns that I didn't expect, and I really enjoyed that. The story arcs with different characters and how he wove in side players that I certainly didn't expect to be really added a depth and an interesting layer of notes to the film that I think anyone would appreciate, because it lets you really think about what's going on. And there's no real way to predict where exactly the film will go, which is always refreshing to view. And one thing that helped that was that Del Toro did not feed the audience information. He let you pick up on things by dropping little bits of nuggets of data here and there, for lack of a better word, that when you spy them and you pick up on it, you're like, so that's what the previous scene was alluding to. And it really lets you start to make connections in your mind as you travel back through the storyline and bring yourself up to the present moment in the film. And it's hard to do that, I think, very successfully in a movie without being either too subtle or too blatantly obvious. And Del Toro walks that knife line, and he doesn't fall off on either side, and it is very interesting. And it's one of those movies where you almost need to watch it at least 2 or 3 more times in order to fully understand how everything is interconnected and comes together. And I think that's great, because one thing that you really want in a good movie is rewatchability, and I think that this film is one that you can rewatch, and you will probably find new little Easter eggs and tidbits every time you watch it. And that's fantastic. As a writer-director for this movie, he did an amazing job. This is what a good writer-director film should be. And other writer-directors should really take note. Ryan Johnson. So I will say, before I get to the spoilers, in case people are worried, there was rumors, because this film is rated R, that you're going to see some fish sticks. I don't know how else to politely put it. Fear not. There's nothing to worry about in that department. I personally wouldn't take a child to see the film, but there's no you'll be okay in terms of anatomical reveals. It'll be fine. So I'm going to talk about the spoilers now and why I have given this film, for me, an 8.5 out of 10 versus a full 9 or 10 out of 10. So if you don't want to have the film spoiled, go ahead and cut when I tell you to cut. I will tell you, if this seems like a movie that you may not like, my husband felt the same way, and we went and saw it. And he keeps talking about it to me, and he kept telling me, I didn't think I would like this at all. But it was really great. So visually, it's stunning. The story is very fresh and original. The visuals are fantastic. There's not too much CGI. It doesn't look corny. Everything is very watery and fluid, which is very much so mirroring the theme and the title and the main characters of the movie. So it's very well done. If you don't think you'll like it, just give it a shot. It's very interesting. It's certainly one of the more different films we've seen in a while, and that's what really makes it special. So with that being said, I am now going to talk about spoilers. So I'm going to give you about 3 seconds to pause the video if you don't want to hear spoilers and why it is I didn't give this a perfect score. So 1, a 2, a 3. All right, so the reason I didn't give this a full score, and here are my spoilers. There were 3 major issues that I had. There were a couple rough transitions in the movie. That's my first major issue. One of them, for example, most of them were in the, let me back up. Most of them were in the beginning of the movie. There were scenes where Sally Hawkins went from looking at Aquaman in the tank and thinking, oh my gosh, there's a creature in there, and he like slams on the tank and he lets it know that there's a live being inside this tank. We go from her looking at whatever's in the water to having Strickland's fingers completely bitten off, indicating that this creature's dangerous. And then there's no explanation of why she decides to reach out and befriend this creature. All of a sudden, she just decides to feed it eggs. And while you kind of need that transition to happen quickly in order for the story's pacing to continue, it would have been good to have a little bit more of a transition to fully understand her motivations, why she was so intrigued by this creature, that despite knowing nothing about it and then watching an obvious display of violence, that she would just go ahead and initiate contact in such a casual manner as she does, really with no thought to her own safety. So perhaps this may be something that is explained better. If I saw this movie another 2 or 3 times, I would understand that, but that is one example of a couple transitions in the beginning that were a little bit rough. Another transition that was a little rough was the initial Russian doctor transition. There's an arc with a Russian doctor who works at the facility, who ends up assisting them in terms of rescuing this creature. But the initial establishing scenario where you find out that he is working for another country's government is not as well defined as it might have been. And I kind of had a couple question marks at first, and you rapidly figure out what's going on. But as I mentioned, they were a little rough, the transitions. Another thing that I didn't quite like much at all was that near the end, you find out that Aquaman is essentially a godlike figure, and he has healing powers, and he's able to regrow hair on her balding friend. And there's a lot of scenes where they're having relations, and he's touching her, and he's doing his little glowy blue healing thing, and one would assume that something about her was going to get healed. And there's a scene where she's sitting at the table and she starts to speak, and her character, of course, is a mute, so she can't speak. So she starts to speak, and in fact, she starts to sing. And initially, I thought, wow, this is a very beautiful way of showing how incredible this creature's healing powers truly are. But it wasn't. I thought it was going to be some kind of transformation through the song, and it was just like this random musical segment. And granted, it fit in with other parts of the movie. They had a big emphasis on films and TV shows and music of that time period throughout the film. But it was just such an odd section of the movie. It was beautiful visually, and the music was stunning. I mean, this film won Best Score, but it just seemed very off to me. So that section in particular, I wasn't quite fond of. The last thing that really didn't jive well with me was the ending. And this is a very personal view, and I know that there are people who have watched this movie that will probably vehemently disagree with me, but I don't think that there should have been a happy ending. It should have been very bittersweet. And part of me knows that this is intended to be an adult, darker fairy tale of a sort. So fairy tales in modern day and age are expected to have, to at least a degree, a semblance of a happy ending. And the opening sequence and then the ending sequence were narrated in such a way by her friend that you are given to understand that she's supposed to be some kind of, river princess after she meets this South American deity who is the creature that I keep calling Aquaman, for lack of a better word. I don't know that he ever had a name in the movie anyway. So I know the fairy tales are technically supposed to have a happy ending, but I can't help but feel that it would have been better if it had ended with both of them dying, because there is a scene where you think they're going to die, and she just kind of cradles her hand in his. And I thought at the time, I was like, this has to be the end. This is amazing. This is so wonderfully bittersweet and tasteful, because in the end, they're not alone anymore. They are together, even in death. And I was like, that is so poetic. It's perfect. And then that's not what happens. And that's where the movie got a little predictable. Like, oh, okay, well, he's magic, so he came back to life and healed himself. And, you know, he's magic, so he took her and healed her. And magically, her scars are actually gills. Who would have thought? So it is a nice ending. Is it as great of an ending as it could be? I don't think so. But that is a very personal opinion. I think my husband was very happy with the ending, although he did agree that the gills thing was very predictable. It just reminded me of something that the director could have done with the ending to just kind of take it up like a little bit, one more notch, and that wasn't done. It reminds me actually of the older movie Teeth, where at the end they have that clip of the girl and she just turns and smiles at the camera. And the movie is called Teeth. And if you haven't seen that movie, I won't describe it for you. We're talking about The Shape of Water. Just Google it, look it up. And I had the same complaint with that movie. It was a waste of an opportunity. She smiled with her lips closed. The movie's called Teeth. It was about her having teeth on different parts of her anatomy. And if the director had had her smile with her teeth, oh, it would have been so good. And I felt the same way about this movie, and I immediately thought of that film, because this was one of those movies where I have watched it and I've thought, oh, that could have been so much better. It was just like in Rogue One, where I was so mad that all of the characters died. But it was better that they did, and it made for a better movie and a better story. And it would have made, I think, a better ending and a better story if they had both died together hand in hand. And then it would have ended as it did, with the umbrellas and the police and her friends standing there kind of recalling them. So that is why I didn't quite give it the highest score or a 9 out of 10. You know, I had those 3 issues. There were some rough transitions. The musical scene didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I'm just grateful that it wasn't longer than it was. And I felt like the ending was largely a missed opportunity, although I will say I understand why it was done the way it was. And so in that regard, none of the personal points I deducted from my rating from this film came from that. That's just an aside that I think he could have done better if he had given himself permission to. So in conclusion, I think it was a great movie. It surprised me. I think it surprised a lot of people. And I recommend seeing it. If for nothing else, it's something that's very fresh coming out of Hollywood. And it's something very different. So I hope you guys are doing well. Let me know if you watch The Shape of Water. Let me know what your rating is. Let me know your thoughts. And if you guys have a movie that you'd like to see me review, whether it's a classic movie or like a semi-older movie or a newer film, let me know and I'll do my best to watch it and I'll review it for you. And I'll give you my thoughts. All right? Take it easy, guys. Peace.